Hello, hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Lunch and Learn Live with Lynn. I would like to welcome you if this is your 19th time watching me, because I have 19 episodes of this live that I do each and every week, excepting the times when I go on vacation, like I did last week. It was actually a really nice break. And you know what? I was trying to plan to do a live from the top of a mountain, but there wasn't any cell service, so I couldn't do it. So I'm back here in my studio. And this week I wanted to chat about a topic that I haven't talked about yet, and that is widowhood. And yes, it's a hard topic to talk about, right? Because uh death, losing your spouse, any of those situations can bring about such pain, and it's a really hard topic to think about and to prepare for. But it is so very important that you do think about it and you are prepared, because statistics tell us that the average age of widowhood is 59. Yes, 59. And I actually have two friends who lost their husbands. Both husbands were 59 years old. And in both cases, it was a surprise and a shock, and obviously emotionally, physically, financially draining. So it happens, and it happens frequently, and more often than not, it happens to women. So with the her retirement platform, we do focus on women in widowhood because it happens far too often to women, and we want you to be prepared if it hasn't happened to you, and hopefully it doesn't, right? But at some point, you or your spouse are going to pass from this earth, and we believe that either of you should be prepared for the other's passing. Now, if you've recently lost a spouse, these things may have already been done that I'm going to talk about today, but there's many things that you can still do after the loss of a spouse that you can and should do. One is, from a financial perspective, things you can do to improve your retirement years. If you lost the spouse recently and you're not yet retired, there's things you can and should do. And then also, you know, your family has experienced a loss. So this might be your cue to prepare your family, your friends for your passing, right? So perhaps you and your spouse weren't as prepared for his passing, but there are things you can and should do to prepare your family and your friends for your passing. Now, you can take a moment to breathe and, regroup. uh, in the case of my friends, it was unexpected. They had plans, and the plans all had to change. So they had to, relatively quickly adjust and, implement that plan B. So I have a checklist here that I want to share. I'm going to share some other data points and a couple other resources, but I wanted to go over this checklist to help women who are newly widowed go through the proper steps. Now, this checklist you can get in the show notes. I'll provide a link to it, because it's good to have handy, right? Keep in that file drawer, keep on your computer somewhere, someplace, just in case you need it. Or if you have a friend or a family member, you can whip out this checklist and say, hey, I've got you covered. Here's a great checklist. And this also gives you things to think about. And the resources I'm going to give you can also be used, as I said, to prepare for your passing. Not an easy topic to talk about, not an easy topic to talk about with your spouse, your children, even talking about your parents. Maybe you have a mom or a dad who's going to go through or has recently gone through losing a spouse, and you want to help them as a child. So, you could do that as well. It's always great to take information that you learn and use it to help someone else, a dear friend, a cousin, whatever. So let's jump into this. Like I said, no one is ever prepared to lose a spouse. It's often obviously accompanied by pain and shock and bewilderment. Like, what do I do now? Especially if it was unexpected. As a surviving husband or wife in this case, you're going to experience loneliness and in a, an incredible feeling of vulnerability. And at this point, your thoughts and focus are really channeled on your grief. While I didn't lose a spouse, I lost my mom last year, and I was really consumed with grief, but yet I had to deal with the practical parts of losing her and being uh, her executor of her will and her estate. There were things I had to do in the midst of that grief. So I can only imagine with a spouse that you're financially dependent on, that you're going to, have to handle all of this stuff at the same time you are grieving. So having some practical planning tools at your fingertips, checklist, so important. Obviously, the healing journey, whether you've been through it or not already, from losing a spouse is can be long and bumpy, right? Ups and downs. But now you have to figure out how to go on with your life, how to protect yourself, your family, your money, and maybe very shortly, or maybe you've just transitioned into retirement. You hear these stories of a couple that have worked hard their whole lives and they retire, and within a couple of years, one of them, typically a husband, passes away, has a heart attack. We have a client who came home from grocery shopping, both retired. One of my favorite people in the world, um, went into the bathroom and he had a heart attack. Her life, completely turned upside down, as we can all imagine and relate to. And the good news is he had her very well prepared, left her in very good shape. So you hear those stories where, someone has prepared, and then you hear those stories where there isn't any preparation. So I'm encouraging you all to get prepared. So let's go through this checklist. I feel like the good news, the silver lining, is that taking one step at a time, following guidance, you'll eventually get through. You'll get to the other side. You'll find your light again, which I've been talking about with my mom. She was a bright light, and I'm still searching for the light that she shined, and I'm creating a new light in her memory. But you will eventually find yourself again. And when you take the proper steps, you will fare, you will come out on the positive end, mentally, physically, financially. So let's go through some of these. And again, I'm not going to cover these in all the detail that's provided in this checklist, because I want people to go off and download the checklist. It would take me way too long to go through all the details of the checklist. So I'm going to cover the high points, and then you can go download the checklist. So immediately after your spouse's death, the earliest days and hours after the death are obviously the most difficult. But here's a few crucial things that you need to do immediately. Check your spouse's driver's license to confirm organ donor status, and follow any advanced healthcare directives, such as a living will or healthcare proxy, that your spouse had in place. And it's best to seek advice from a preferred medical coordinator, such as the hospital, nursing home, or hospice, on how to go about the process. And if your spouse died at home, contact the nearest hospital. You won't incur any costs for the service. Also, knowledgeable staff can help answer any questions you have about next steps. Your preferred medical coordinator will ask to know which funeral home you would like to use. Tough questions. I had conversations with my siblings, because we knew my mom was going to pass from ovarian cancer. So we kind of had all of this in place, but it was the most difficult planning that I've ever had to do. but really important because it just makes this process of grieving easier, right? And getting the practical things out of the way and planned for easier. Um, Obviously, funeral home will make arrangements to transport your spouse, his body, um, all of that type of stuff. I feel like if you go to a funeral home while you're in a state of shock, your decisions might be based on current emotions, which can cost time and excessive expense. Go home, gather your thoughts, talk to a trusted friend, family member who may give insight as you think about the next steps that you need to take. Get in touch with your immediate family members or close friends. Have a trusted person make the call on your behalf. Let's see, what else? Reach out to your spouse's employer to inform them of the death. Um, Reach out to your employer to arrange bereavement leave. If you have children who are still going to school, reach out to the school. Um, at this time, you're probably ready to start making plans for celebration of life and those types of things. Discuss any specific instructions that your spouse left regarding the service. And I'm going to talk about how you can prepare um, in advance of you or your spouse passing so you each know your desired arrangements. And I'm going to share a resource with you for that. If your spouse was a veteran of the armed services, there may be special arrangements. If your spouse was a member of a fraternal organization, such as like a Masonic lodge, there could be some assistance. Um, Also, you want to do things like getting multiple copies of the death certificate. Trust me, I had to keep sending copies of my mom's death certificate last year, which was like painful in and of itself because every time I looked at the document, it was just a reminder of, okay, yes, she passed away. Order pre-printed thank you cards, like all of these things can help prepare. Let your trusted friends and family members help you contact and reach out to all these services. Like, don't try to do everything yourself. It's so important to get help. Ask people, right? Don't be afraid to ask people for help. Um, Bring on someone who can keep track of all this for you, right? I had a best friend, I had some siblings who helped me through this process with my mom. Ask friends to help out with, shopping and food preparation and other daily tasks. This will help in the grieving process, and it will bring people around you because it's so important to have that tribe of people around you as you are going through this. Tough one, but preparing your spouse's obituary. I know in the case of my mom, she kind of wrote one. I know that some people do write their obituaries in advance. And, you can get guidance from a funeral home for that, from a family member who's a good writer or who was very close to the person who's passed away. Think about wakes and celebration of life and how you want those things performed or how you think your spouse would want those things performed if it wasn't already written down. And I'm going to talk about that. Very, very important to observe self-care. Like, you have to take care of yourself. You have to try to sleep. Obviously, grief can disrupt a lot of things in your life, your sleeping patterns, your daily habits, but you really need to take breaks, like step away from it, go for walks, meditate, exercise, eat right, gather with people that make you happy, talk about your loved one, share memories. All these things are so important for mental health. So immediately after the funeral or memorial, make sure you set aside time for yourself. Don't do things because someone else thinks you should. This is your process, and the way you decide to handle this pain is really, really up to you. Take your time, reach out to the people who are close to you. Again, reach out to all the people in your spouse's life who can share stories and memories together. And I always say, don't feel pressured to go back to normal. You're never going to go back to normal because normal has completely changed. But don't feel pressured to go back to what you were doing right before this happened, right? Think about and prepare for going back to the change and maybe focusing on some of those things that you can still do to remind yourself of your spouse. So there were certain things that I did with my mom that I continue to do because it brings a smile to my face. And I say, Mom, we're doing this together. Even though you're not physically here, you're here spiritually. And it just has helped me. Um, like dancing to Elvis Presley. Yeah, I still do that. And Mom and I dance to Elvis Presley. So, like I said, you have to create a new normal because of the loss. So, you know, creating that new normal is going to be on your timeline, and the grieving process is different for everyone. So there's no right or wrong. You know, maybe sending thank yous will help you in your healing process. Sending it to all the people who provided help and support. Your house is probably going to be filled with flowers and plants and greeting cards. Um, Very important to inform Social Security about your spouse's death and to look at Social Security and say, okay, am I going to be eligible for my spousal Social Security benefit? Because it is up to 100% of your spouse's benefit that you may be eligible for. It depends upon the amount of your benefit, and you only get 100% at your full retirement age. So very important, number one, to notify Social Security. Sometimes the funeral home does this automatically, but you want to check that out. If you have children who are dependent on you or your spouse, they may be eligible for benefits. And so it's very, very important to look at Social Security as just one very important task, both from a notification perspective, especially if your spouse was receiving Social Security, and then what are your future Social Security options being a surviving spouse. And to be a surviving spouse to receive Social Security, you have to have been married at least 9 months. Okay. Reach out to your health insurance representative, cancel your spouse's health insurance. And you know what? This is a good time to assess your situation, right? Because maybe you are on a family plan. So understanding your health insurance situation is very important. Locate your spouse's original will. Very important. Or, you know, some cases, hopefully, you'll be organized and prepared, and you have a will. This could be a note to yourself. Shoot, we didn't have a will. This is a very important time for you to consider getting a will. I have resources for that. But locate the will, contact your attorney to organize the filing of that will for probate. And there's some states that necessitate filing within 10 days of death. So you do have a time frame there. So check with your attorney to confirm if these rules apply to your state. Now, if your spouse was a business owner or partnered with someone to do business, you should start making arrangements for a business continuation, figuring out, how that business will be sold or transferred, getting business valuations. I mean, that's like a whole nother initiative in and of itself. I know because I co-own a business with my significant other, and we have key man insurance, which means if one of us passes away, we have insurance to cover that continuation. So there's a lot of factors involved there. If your significant other owned a business, or if you owned a business together. One of the other emotional support mechanisms that I like, and I've done it throughout my life, is journaling. So journaling your feelings could be very helpful. Reading, I actually bought a book called Daughters Without Mothers, and I bought another book. Oh shoot, I can't remember the name of it. It was actually really, really good, and I'm brain cramping, but I will get the name of that book, because it's not specific to the type of loss that you suffered, but it did provide some support for myself and my kids. I think writing down all of this, journaling it, and keeping a track of your to-do list is extremely important, so you don't get lost in the details. I tend to write everything down. So having this checklist, having it all handy and organized, I wrote down like who I called, when I called them, who I talked to. I had copies of all the forms that I submitted, any of the back and forth emails I put in a separate folder because 9 times out of 10, you have to come back and either repeat it or resend it or check it because it was wrong. In fact, I was just in contact with a CPA because my mom passed last April, but we still have the 2023 tax return to complete. So at the end of this year, I thought, okay, I'm all wrapped up. I've got everything done. And then I was like, wait a minute, we have one more tax return to file for my mom. And the CPA reached out to me yesterday and said he was missing some of the pages from one of her accounts. Well, I was organized and I had access to those pages, and I quickly scanned them and sent them over to him. So I didn't have to go scrambling around. It definitely eased my stress, and I just sent it over to him and I was done. So being prepared and being organized is so important to your mental health and obviously to your financial health because you'll have all that information at your fingertips. So in the days following the loss of a spouse, let's say a month to 2 months after, you want to look at your cost of living, right? Because it's going to change. You're now uh, solo, right? You're single. So how are your expenses going to change? How are your income sources going to change? So you need to do a complete financial audit to say, okay, what does my life look like now that I'm single? Hopefully, you and your spouse have prepared for that because one of the things that happens is when people don't plan for the loss of one of the spouses, you end up like, okay, what do I do? Right? I lost access to, pensions or whatever it might be. There could be income sources that you lose access to. Obviously, there's expenses involved with losing someone, funeral expenses, and hopefully you've prepared for those things, life insurance, all that kind of thing. But very, very important to take a financial audit and figure out expenses, income sources, and how you are going to live financially. You need to visit the bank if you had a joint account with your spouse. They always say to consider keeping a bank account open for at least a year. I've actually gone a little longer than that because there was some delay with some of my mom's paperwork. But very important to go check in with the bank on those bank accounts. Make sure you uncover all the accounts. I have a neighbor who said to me, gosh, if my spouse passes away, I know nothing about our financial situation. So I'm encouraging her to find out or to make sure that her husband has left her files, a folder, all the documentation. So if you don't know this information and you have not lost your spouse, very important to make sure you know this information or you have access to the information. One of the things people do is they lose track of commitments and, appointments, and because you don't even know what day it is. So there were some things that I could have done that I just totally brain cramped on. I forgot about one of my bills, and you're just in another state of mind. So to the extent that you have all your, bills on auto pay and you have calendar reminders set so that you don't miss something important going on in your life. It's another tactical thing that you can do. Um, yeah, very important that if you are having someone helping you, that they have access to contact information and phone numbers. And again, I will share a resource with you shortly where you can record all of that just to make keeping your life organized as possible through this process easier for yourself and those who are helping you out. My suggestion for now is to not make any long-term decisions. Oftentimes it means, oh, should I move? Should I move closer to family, friends? Because now I'm alone up here in New Hampshire, and my whole family lives in Georgia. Like, take some time to ruminate, to think about, your main priority now is to focus on daily needs. fulfilling short-term priorities. You can, think about the future, but really give yourself the room to consider all your options. Look at the financial implications of those options. So don't make rush decisions, such as selling a home, leaving a job, or sometimes people start like shopping and spending money and just kind of throwing caution to the wind. Like I said, having all your documents in one place is so important. A will, death certificate, marriage license, birth certificates, social security numbers, insurance policies, bank and investment statements, knowing your spouse's IRA and 401ks, recent tax returns, vehicle titles, loan documents. I have a file cabinet over here to my left where I have all that. I actually have a lockbox for my kids, with my personal info and emergency binder completed for them. Um, you know, Putting it all in one place is very, very important. And then we talked a little bit about Social Security. You want to follow up with employers on some of those survivor benefits, whether it's pension benefits with the employer, veteran benefits, Social Security. Very, very important. Contacting life insurance companies to get that process started if this distribution coming to you for that. There's also tax implications, so you want to make sure you talk with your CPA or your financial advisor about any inherited IRAs. For instance, I inherited a small IRA from my mom, and I had to decide, you know, when I wanted to pay the tax or when I had to pay the tax. So there's all those things that if you have a good financial advisor or CPA who can help you just figure all that out. I mean, unless you have, you know, uh, interest and desire to work on that. Sometimes distraction is what people need, and this might be a welcome distraction. Otherwise, set up a meeting with him or her and say, "Here's my situation. What do I do? Help me make these decisions." And get used to filling out a lot of paperwork. So much paperwork. It's just part of it. It's part of the process. So keep track of all that paperwork. When you filled it out, keep copies. Very important. And I'm going to keep reminding you about self-care because it's so important. So, you know, continue, right? Come up with a new hobby, or keep doing something you did together. Maybe you went for walks. Some people actually go out and purchase a pet, a cat, a dog, something to keep you, someone, furry friend to keep you, you know, keep you feeling safe, happy, um, just someone to snuggle with, right? I was snuggling my two dogs a lot after my mom passed. They provide me a lot of comfort. Let's see, 3 to 6 months after your spouse's death, again, do that financial check-in, right? Now might be the time to start thinking more long term. Book that appointment with the financial advisor, the tax person, and say, okay, I'm through the initial, tactical things. What do I need to do strategically? What can I do? How can I squeeze more juice out of my lemons? Here's my financial situation. Here's the distributions from retirement accounts, our shared accounts, bank accounts. You should kind of have a good inventory of all those things. And you can meet with someone, unless you want to do it yourself, and figure out, okay, how do I put this together? How do I put this puzzle together to help me have, the best possible remaining days of my life without hopefully too much financial concern? Really important to have an emergency fund during this period. Having adequate cash on hand right now is important because you might have some unexpected needs. So really important to have some liquid cash always on hand, but this is yet another reason to have that liquid cash account should you have some unexpected expenses. You want to do the other main mundane tasks of removing your spouse's name from accounts, utility accounts, mobile phone. internet services, those types of things. You want to inform creditors, and you want to close credit card accounts that are solely in your spouse's name. Again, you'll have to provide copies of the death certificate. Um, and people suggest that you provide copies to the credit reporting agencies like Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. Uh, Doing so, they'll be able to flag your deceased spouse's information. So this is a step that actually deters identity thefts from taking advantage of your spouse's personal information for those dishonest purposes. So it is an important step, and to continue monitoring your spouse's credit history probably over the next 6 to 12 months, just to make sure there's nothing fishy going on there. There is another tactical thing that you can do: make inquiries at your local tax authority to know if your state offers a widow's property tax exemption. So each state has its own rules about this, so your local tax authority will be able to provide this information. And again, if you need counseling, outside help, mental help, physical help. I know a woman who's widowed, and she's like, you know what? My husband wasn't very active, so we weren't active as a couple. I'm going to get active because he was unhealthy and he passed away, and I don't want this to happen to me. So yeah, it's a good time to kind of rethink and recommit to your physical health. So again, 6 to 9 months after the death of a spouse, you want to, follow up with your attorney, track that probation of the will. Lots in that capacity to follow up with. Obviously, will with children, sometimes stepchildren, all of that can just exacerbate all the things that you need to do. And then, take time to think about family, friends, work, home, interests. Which people are most important to you? Sometimes in this process, you lose touch with the people that you were in touch with in regular relationship with prior to losing your spouse, and life can change. So one of the most important facets of longevity and happiness in life is relationships. So you want to make sure that you don't isolate yourself and that you don't stay in a grief bubble and forget about those relationships, forget about the people that care about you, or establishing new relationships, right? Because there's new routines, new things that you will undertake in your life, new opportunities to go out and create new relationships. So social interaction is critical, because just retirement alone, let alone losing a spouse, but retirement alone can be isolating for so many people because they leave their workplace and they lose those social relationships. It is kind of, retirement can feel like the death, because it's the death of a previous life. So the same thing applies, right? You're going to potentially lose some of those routines. Maybe you went to the regular golf outings with other couples, and you don't want to do that anymore because you're not a couple, like those types of things. So you have to make sure that you protect those relationships, and consider going as a single, right? So we had a travel group with four couples, and one of our travel buddies is one of the people that lost her husband when he was 59, she was 61. The next trip, she was like, oh, nah, I shouldn't go, I'm single. I'm like, are you crazy? What? Of course you're coming. You have such a wonderful, vibrant life ahead of you, and you have such a big personality, and Brian wouldn't want you to not go on these trips. So, as she said, she was a fifth or sixth wheel, seventh wheel, whatever she was, but she joined and came along. She actually brought one of her best friends that she worked with on one of our trips. And so, as hard as it was for her for that first trip, by the second or third trip, she was like in her groove, and she was getting used to, traveling in a different manner. But she still was there, and she was still embracing all of the memories and the experiences that we were all having. 9 to 12 months after the death of your spouse, that anniversary date is a tough one. Um, but it's a time to maybe go back and reflect and celebrate all of the things that you've been able to do over the last year. Like, recognize the hard work that this takes. Like, it's a lot. And the more prepared you can be, yeah, it might be, it might be a little depressing thing to prepare for, to have a death date or a money date with your significant other. It's so important that you have those conversations and you are prepared as possible. And a year out, you can look back and say, these are all the things I did. These are the things I overcame. And you can write in your journal, that whole process and look back at those notes. If you're a writer, write a story about it. I wrote several stories about my mom. I did some podcasts about her. I did, some blog posts, and writing just made the grieving process much easier for me. I've gone on multiple walks where she and I have conversations, and people probably look at me and think, why is that woman talking to herself? Because yes, I do talk out loud, but it was my process and it's your process, and you go through that process however you need to. But you should make sure that you don't let go all of the practical money related things that you need to do and to pay attention to, or at least if you can't handle it, you have a trusted friend, trusted advisor helping you through this process. It's a lot, and do not feel bad about asking for help. Okay. Finally, I think everyone should develop a vision statement for their life. So, it's not something you are going to do immediately, but a year out is probably a good time to say, what vision do I have for myself and my life, my new life? And start crafting that, start articulating it. Think about, what is it that I want to do with this one precious life? What are some things that I want to do to honor my spouse's memory? And take him or her along with you wherever you go. So that friend that I mentioned, when she goes on trips, she spreads some of his ashes wherever she goes. So she's taking him with her, and she's sprinkling him around the country and the world on her travels. So that's one way for her to bring him with her and to honor his memory, because they were planning to travel together. All right. Um, it sometimes time flies and sometimes it seems like it goes really slow. The truth is, a year out from losing your spouse is really just the beginning. And the steps in this very detailed checklist that I'm going to provide a link to can help lay the foundation for, a future that captures your top priorities, both personally and financially, and it hopefully can be a guide. And of course, there's lots of books out there that can help you. There's a book called In Case You Get Hit by a Bus. It's actually in the bookstore on my website at herretirement.com. It's a book. And some people might look at it and go, oh, a book is way too overwhelming. Just give me a 4 or 5 page checklist. So I'm going to put a couple checklists in the show notes here for you to access. Sometimes checklists are a little less overwhelming than a full book. But I always say, in any given journey, whether you're traveling to retirement or through losing a spouse, you really need a reliable map. And often, most of the time, you need some dependable traveling companions. So hopefully think about who those traveling companions can be for you in your life. Also, professional and trustworthy tax advisors, attorneys, financial advisors, who you trust and feel like they got your back in your greatest time of sorrow, in your greatest time of need. All of these people can help provide the roadmap or just hold your hand as you go along through this journey. So the one other resource that I wanted to mention to you before I finish up today is what I call the Her Personal Info and Emergency Planner. And this is a place where you can keep all of that important stuff that I've mentioned in this live. It allows you and your family um, to keep calm and carry on. Now, this one is for her, so it's designed for the single woman. So if you haven't had one prior to your spouse passing, this is a great thing to have post losing your spouse so that you have everything documented for your family and your friends. This is over 100 pages. It's a downloadable PDF. So it's, a lot. It records everything about your life personally, financially, medically, legally. There's even sections in the back where you can write some what I call love notes to your family. You can record some of your memories that you want people to have about your life. And so this is a downloadable PDF, or you can just fill it out as an electronic file. So it's a fillable PDF, and then you can save it somewhere on your computer. Or like I did, as I printed it and I put 3 holes in it, and it goes into a binder, and then you can just fill it out the old-fashioned way. But in addition to this, if you and your spouse, you want to have this discussion about the loss of one of you, there is a couples version also. So you can have a family personal info and emergency planner. So important. And I actually created this after the death of my mom because she gave me some written notes and some lists, call Social Security, cancel my license, call the credit reporting bureau. But it was only a sheet of paper, and I really wished I had more. And then she left me a note also, a handwritten note, which I cherish. But yeah, this is so much more than that, and it's so much more valuable in this process. And you can check that out at heremergencyplanner.com. So again, heremergencyplanner.com. And on that page, you can purchase this PDF of this one, or you can link to the couples version for you and a spouse or significant other. So that's a wrap on a tough subject. Actually, this week my uncle passed away. His significant other is actually in a facility suffering with Alzheimer's. So my cousins won't have nearly the amount of work to do because she's already taken care of. But death is tough. It's tough. It's a tough thing to go through for anyone, whether it's a spouse, a sibling, a mom, a dad. And I always say, be prepared, get yourself prepared as much as possible. Have these documents organized, get yourself organized, and let people know what your wishes are. Very, very important. So there's no, you have more than one child. There's no arguments about what mom wanted, what dad wanted. It's all written down. It's the best gift that you can leave your family and your friends. So write it down. You don't have to use my personal info and emergency planner. You can, use your own, purchase a book, whatever. There's lots of resources out there, but I highly encourage you to be prepared. So thanks for watching this week's Lunch and Learn Live on a tough but very, very important topic. And if you are recently widowed, or you have a spouse that is ill, and you know that the inevitable is coming, but you want some help with the financial aspects of this transition, this process, definitely reach out to me, because I can connect you to some financial resources that can help you get through this and protect you, yourself, your family, and your money. All right. Here's to getting her done. Thanks for watching.